On this episode of Dome Runners TV, we are going to show how I went from this little pile of sprue to this completed power armor stand in just a couple of hours of work. This episode is brought to you by Jimmy's Guns and Stuff, with locations throughout Necromunda, and now with our new location coming to the Baltimore post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Dome Runners TV, your guide to the Underhive and beyond.
Hey there, scabby scummers and gangers, Crimson Oracle here with another episode of Dome Runners TV. Today I'm going to be showing off the process by which I built a Fallout 4 power armor stand. Now, this is the first of what will be many Fallout themed videos on this channel. With the upcoming release of Fallout Tactics later this year, I wanted to, sort of dive into that world and start modeling in that world. And as a result, I am currently working on a Red Rocket station. And one of the things I wanted to add to the garage was a power armor stand. Now, I am printing official STL files from Modiphius, the company that makes the Wasteland Warfare game, and will be putting out Fallout Tactics. And I am really loving their files. I mean, they have... It's funny to say, I think they have the most comprehensive set of terrain decorating features in any current manufacturer of models that I know of. Now, these are all printed files, so you do have to actually get them printed. And I think that has to do with Modiphius having constrained production capacity, which is understandable. They're a relatively small game company. And this game blew up, so they've been kind of trying to keep things in stock. So it's understandable to turn to using STL files as your distribution method. And as a result, that means that you can get stuff like all of the different Vault Boy bobbleheads and all the different chems and different stuff that you can find in the game, which I absolutely love. Because I have been a big fan of Fallout ever since the first Fallout came out in 1997. It was probably the first isometric role-playing game that I ever played. I watched my stepdad play Baldur's Gate, but I don't think I ever played it myself before I played Fallout. And Fallout left a big impression on me, and I'm like really excited to kind of tackle Fallout topics on this channel. And I think that the new Fallout game could be an absolute awesome game, because I really am a big fan of the designer James Hewitt. But regardless, before we kind of get to the gameplay side of things, I wanted to get a board of terrain done, and I have big plans for Fallout terrain. Some stuff that is, even kind of beyond the scope of what I've done previously with Necromunda, which, if you know how much Necromunda terrain I've done, you can, sort of puzzle out exactly how complicated that's going to be. And it'll be a long process getting that done, but regardless, we are going to be diving into how I built a power armor stand out of, just bits of sprue and other junk I had lying around. It's a relatively simple build. It took probably about 2 hours start to finish, in terms of the actual construction, and the painting didn't take long either. I just wanted to mention that I did put up an Etsy page for the show, where I am selling a bunch of different designs of shirts and such, and you'll likely see some designs that sort of reflect the additional areas that we're going to be covering, getting into Gaslands with my kids for some videos, and getting into Wasteland Warfare and trying out the solo mode on that, because I am interested in kind of exploring all the games that are out there for folks who are interested in skirmishes, and especially sort of run down low setting kind of skirmish stuff. So check out the merch store. The link is in the show notes, and with that, let's get into it.
If you like our content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and for as little as $2 a month you can become a patron and help support the show.
This project starts in a very simple place with the basic pieces of sprue pre-cut to the lengths that I want, that will create the sort of core of the rack, the base of support, the bars going up, and the brace that holds it as a second point of contact on each. I'm going to be making extensive use of some styrene rods. One is a hollow rod and the other is solid and fits within the first rod. Now for these, I am using the first one I cut as a jig. Now generally speaking, it's better to do these kinds of cuts with a jig pre-made. But personally, I wasn't planning this build out in advance, and it was just sort of spur of the moment. Wanted to see if I could do it, and that's how we kind of wound up with this project. Now, these pieces are going to wind up being the ends of bars on the device that will give the impression that there is a hinge that allows these pieces to move, because the power armor stand is supposed to have a bunch of moving parts. You're going to see as we go, I'm going to be adding a lot of elements that create the impression of hinges, even though all of the parts are actually flush and glued together. And here you can see me gluing it to the tops of the tall bars in order to create that hinge. Next up, I am going to glue these tall back supports at a slight angle to the base that's going to support the models. And of course, for the base, I use a simple cardboard stack. By gluing two pieces of cardboard together, you create a nice firm base, and then I'm going to come in with a texture paint later to actually do that component. I have to glue down the supports first, as I think it will give a nice, easy kind of base to build off of, so I'm not having to kind of, deal with lots of problems. And I'm using, of course, a power armored model in order to properly space it out so that I can actually pop a suit of power armor in there if I want to. And now I am trimming off the backs of these sprue pieces in order to create a slight angle when the two connect, because the power armor rack does angle backwards a little bit. And now the little hinge bit that supports this joint gets added on both sides. For the next part, I needed to harvest a little bit more sprue, so I got a little bit of that on camera as well. You just take a piece and you clip it and you sort of shave it down until you've got just your, base sort of structure. And this will become the upper arm of the stand. I also make sure to get the sheet styrene set up so that it will properly support the arms. And of course, I then do the internal part of the piston. And so finally, the upper part of the rack will go up. The pistons go in, and this is really starting to take shape. And there you have it, the base core of the power armor stand. This is immediately recognizable. And for the back brace that keeps the stand together, I'm going to be using zip tie, as it had that kind of mechanical look that I like. So now we're going to be starting our little tricks to create the impression of joints. So I'm going to be cutting some thin card. This comes from like a cereal box or, some other packaging. And I cut them down into pieces because they very easily can be wrapped around things, and that would be great for creating these sort of little brackets that would be holding the joints. So as you can see here, we are putting this, this material around the joint with super glue, and the paper will soak up that super glue and harden marvelously. I use a lot of super glue and cardboard in these kinds of builds. And of course, to seal that illusion of a joint, we want to add a pin on the outside that the joint will be rotating around. Sometimes when I'm dealing with these little pieces of styrene, it's helpful to actually use the blade of the knife to kind of hold up and position the piece. And we've come a long way at this point. I mean, we are darn close to this thing being done. Next, we add the little brace or bars or raised areas on the actual base of the rack. I'm not sure what those are for exactly. Next, we're going to add some little poles sticking out to hang the cables that will connect to the power armor. For the cables themselves, I'm using these sections of brass wire that I use for pinning. We're very close now. I would have probably called it done a few years ago, but I really have gotten to be more. So this is a strip of needlepoint mesh that I cut down, and I'm going to double it up in order to create the sort of slotted spot at the very end of the power armor rack that allows various attachments to kind of hook in. And the final bit of detail before we add texture to the model is to add some chain that will be hanging down, as some of the models are depicted with chains. And of course, the last step before we start painting is to put a healthy amount of texture paste down in order to properly secure the base of the model, keep the model's bottom weighted enough, and to kind of fill in some details as we kind of go over the rest of the model. Like most models I paint, I started with a zenithal primer, and then for this we're coming in with the golden yellow from Pro Acryl to form the base paint job of the rack itself. And I'm putting on a nice sloppy coat here because we're going to be putting in lots and lots of little weathering details, and that'll give us plenty of time to clean up any areas that don't need to be yellow. And we're going to come in with Pro Acryl Dark Umber for the base, as I wanted a base that could look like the bottom of either a filthy garage or out somewhere in the wilderness or what have you. For touching up the silver, we come in with the Dark Silver Pro Acryl paint. Their metallics are really nice. And we're going to put down a coating everywhere that's supposed to be silver first. And then we're going to come around and do a rough stippling of exposed metal from the paint chipping off and what have you. Now for another round of stippling, we are going to be using the dark golden brown Pro Acryl paint here, and we're going to be putting it around and partially on top of the silver spots to represent areas that have gotten dirty or are starting to rust, etc. For the wire, this first wire I'm going to do bright Pyrrhic red. For the other one, I'm going to do coal black. And of course, while we have the black out, I will then do a little bit of stippling around those same areas of wear. Very light, again, be, kind of cautious and go easy at first. You can always add more of these little, these little bits of detail later, but you can't easily kind of go backwards. So definitely be kind of gentle with it, but be filthy if you are going for something that's been, essentially weathering for 200 years. And for our final step, we come in with a oil wash. This is a oil paint, a bit of black and a bit of brown mixed together with white spirit, and the white spirit acts actually as a carrier. The paint flows perfectly into the crevices and shades wonderfully. It's absolutely fantastic addition to your sort of painting repertoire. I really like it. I use this in place of a lot of finishing washes that I used to do because cleanup is very easy. If you want to get some of the gunk off that you put on, you just get a bit of white spirit on your brush or a Q-tip, and you can in fact come over and get it all off. And there we have it. The final bit of work is done, and this little thing has gone from little bits of trash and sprue to become my power armor station, and I just couldn't be happier with this project. I'm really glad that I put the time and effort in to get it done because I think it's going to look awesome with the rest of my terrain. And thanks to Carl Casey of White Bat Audio for the show's music. And of course, the show has a Patreon. If you'd like to support us for as little as $2 a month, you can help keep this stuff coming week after week. And of course, thanks to my patrons, you guys all make this show possible. And of course, don't forget to check out the podcast. I have a new episode up today about the Outlands campaign for Necromunda. And of course, everybody out there, please stay safe and don't forget to change your paint water.